Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Best Albums by Year 1980 to 1989. So I'm going to be counting down the best albums from each year throughout the decade, and I'm only going to be choosing each artist once on this countdown, but also throughout the remaining decades. And I have done a video for 1970 to 79, and all the artists on there do not repeat here, just as they will not repeat going forward. And so it's going to make it extra hard, I think, in terms of being able to choose which artists stand out, which albums stand out, from that particular year. So all in all, should be a lot of fun trying to boil this down to one amazing album per year. And that's what we're going to do. We'll dive into it here in just a bit. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help. And of course, if you turn on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on really cool videos just like this with best albums by year for 1980 to 1989. And of course, with the notifications turned on, you're going to get the notifications for the next one in this series going forward. So please do that. Kicking things off here, we are going to start with the best album of 1980, and I really don't think this is any surprise to anyone. It goes to AC/DC, Back in Black, their 7th studio album, selling a whopping 25 million copies in the US and just an obscene number, 50 million worldwide. This is simply one of the biggest all-time selling records ever, period. Doesn't matter whether it's rock, pop, or what it is. This is simply one of the biggest ones ever. In case in point, it's got some of the greatest guitar riffs on it done by Malcolm Young. Simple 3-chord blues rock, but nobody does it better than AC/DC, and especially on this album here. We got the vocals of Brian Johnson accentuating every song, and then, of course, main man Angus Young scorching everything in his path with the lead guitar work that he does on here. It's got 3 of the biggest songs in all of rock: Hell's Bells, Back in Black, the title track, and You Shook Me All Night Long. But again, the album has so many great hits on this throughout. At one point or another, I've literally heard every song on the radio. So this here is essentially like a greatest hits of the band, or a greatest hits of every great rock song ever, however you want to look at it. But either way, helping to make this the best album of 1980. Okay, 1981. Rush, Moving Pictures, 8th studio album, 4 million copies sold in the US. The album itself melds the prog stylings of the time, but with a tighter, shorter song structure to them. I think that was a real big thing that propelled this album the way that it did. This was something that was really starting to happen at this time, but Rush was a leader within that, and it just allowed every song on this album to hit its mark. It doesn't draw out too long on any one thing, so it's just killer from start to finish. You got mega hits on this album like Tom Sawyer. It's just one of the best openings when the bass and keyboards hit on that song. It's a collision course of amazingness, in my opinion. And you got Alex Lifeson doing such a fiery guitar solo on that song. Simply powerful. Limelight, opening riff on that one of the best ones ever, in my opinion, and perfect song to go driving to. One of these days I'm going to do a countdown of driving songs, because this one here would have to be in it. And then we got YYZ, which is one of the all-time best instrumental songs. No vocals needed on this one here, because it is simply so amazing. It is just stunning with those cool rhythms throughout on it. And I think all of that together with the whole album is why this is the best album of 1981. 1982, Asia, self-titled, released their debut studio album. They were a super group made up of members from Yes, ELP, King Crimson, featured the #4 Billboard Hot 100 hit Heat of the Moment. At that time, it was inescapable. You could not get away from that song, all leading to the mega sales of 4 million copies for this thing. But what this album here did, and what I think that the success of this really did, was help to popularize the supergroup, leading to lots of 80s groups or trying to do this. It showed that, the previous sort of dinosaur rockers still had a lot left, life left in them to be able to do something here. They could reinvent themselves, still be successful, taking a popular form of music like prog and simplifying it, turning it into something new. And just a year later, we would see Yes do this with 90125, having their own mega success with it. But all the songs on this album, again, stand out. You also had Only Time Will Tell, which was a number 17 Billboard Hot 100 hit, and the song Soul Survivor, all doing very well for the album. Just good from start to finish. Case in point, for this album to be the best album of 1982. All right, the reason I'm wearing this great ZZ Top Eliminator shirt for 1983, ZZ Top Eliminator, 8th studio album, over 10 million sold in the US. The album sound, it mixes an updated sense of, the electronic elements that were really starting to come into their own in the 1980s. Took their already arguably classic boogie and blues rock sound, was a perfect blend of those musical styles. What was happening in the 80s, what had already happened in the 70s, merged them together, giving you mega hits on this album, like Gimme All Your Lovin', where drummer Frank Beard lays down one of the best opening drum riffs. I can spot this song a mile away right when it starts. Silky smooth guitars from Billy Gibbons. The song Got Me Under Pressure has an amazing driving riff on it, chugging bass line from Dusty Hill. Sharp Dressed Man is one of the most sultry rockin' songs there is. And then Legs, I think, is the best rock song that was able to merge the 80s keyboard stylings with a classic feel from the original era of the band, doing it better than anyone had done prior to that. And again, literally no bad songs on the album. I think I'm going to say that about everyone on here, because that's just how strong, of course, each and every one of these albums are and why they're able to make the spot that they do. But this is another album that defined the 80s era, showing a reinvention by older rockers, leading to many more trying the same thing to varying degrees of success. But ZZ Top, and with Eliminator, they were an originator in doing that, leading to why I think this is the best album for 1983. All right, 1984. And what album could you have from 1984 that is the perfect one, but Van Halen 1984? 6th studio album, 10 million sold for this one here. Right from the get-go, the instrumental opener on it, the synthesizer-laden song 1984 that is the title track on it, was so futuristic sounding at the time, but even today, I find that is still the case. I always wish that song had been a much longer, not just an intro, but an actual song. I always thought it was so amazing. But as it rolls right into the next track, Jump, which has got to be the happiest upbeat song there ever was, and from that we go into one of the best driving songs ever, Panama. They show that in the music video in and of itself, but it's just a cruising song. It moves the album along amazingly. And then finally, Hot for Teacher on this album. The amazing shredding guitar solo that Eddie does right at the beginning of this, nothing can top it. I mean, you've got so many great standout tracks on this one album alone. There's other great ones though. There's the song I'll Wait on the album that was co-written by Doobie Brothers frontman Michael McDonald. And despite its amazing success, Van Halen never made a video for it. So it was released as a single, but just no video, and you kind of wonder why. But back then, 1984, when this was all going on, people didn't really push albums the way they did moving later on, and of course presently, where albums were really pushed for multiple years sometimes. Van Halen, in my opinion, is one of the bands that invented glam metal. They did it so well, though, that they actually rose above the moniker glam metal. So I don't even call them that anymore. Sort of the same way other bands did manage to do the same thing. Guns N' Roses being another one of those. But the band itself, centered around Eddie's guitar technique. I don't think there's ever going to be another band that can do this to that degree. It's an absolutely brilliant album, making it the best album of 1984. Okay, 1985, Heart, self-titled release, 8th studio album. This one here continued the band's transition to mainstream rock in the 80s. It yielded insane commercial success for the band after their couple previous albums just had not really done so well. Don't know if they had so much bombed, but just definitely did not provide the success that they had once had, helping to turn this album into a 5 million selling album for the US. It was produced by Ron Nevison, who is perfect at doing what he did for this album, giving it the sound that he did. And the album itself relied on outside writers, and while in and of itself the songs on here are amazingly written, I find that it's the performance of Heart that actually was able to bring this album over the top for a home run. And that's why I'm featuring it in here. Because normally I wouldn't want to feature a band that doesn't write their own material type stuff like that. Heart does write their stuff, but this album was done a little bit differently. The thing is, where I talk about the performance of the band, case in point with the song What About Love. So that was originally written and recorded by the Canadian band Toronto, which also features 2 front women in the band. But Heart was the one who was able to turn it into the mega hit. And it wasn't like Heart was sitting at the top of the charts when they did this. They were at the bottom, and they somehow managed to turn everything around. And I just think that that shows the power of this album. That song itself would climb all the way to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, making for a huge comeback for the band. From the album opener, which is probably my favorite song on this album, If Looks Could Kill. I think it's got such a killer, tough vibe sound on that song, just chugging away on it. But the next 3 songs on it, the aforementioned What About Love, Never, which went to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, followed by These Dreams, which was a number 1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. The band just showed that they were far from being done. They had a lot of gas left in the tank, all being able to propel this album as the top spot for 1985. Okay, 1986, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, 3rd studio album, certified for sales of 12 million copies in the US. And I'm mentioning all the sales figures not to justify that they are the album that I'm selecting, but simply just to show you how big they are. I'm always interested in that little extra bit of info on an album. I like to know where it placed because it doesn't always get that level of attention today. So that's why I'm really providing it here. But obviously there's so much more that makes these albums great. For this one here, I think it's where the band really came together. You know, the 2 previous albums that had been made were good, but this is where it all gelled for the band. From the opening chords of the pipe organ, Let It Rock, this album did just that. It rocked so hard from start to finish. It was a game changer at the time. Featured career-defining songs for the band, like 2 number 1 Billboard Hot 100 hits, You Give Love a Bad Name and Living on a Prayer. I mean, it's kind of amazing when you stop and think about that Bon Jovi isn't on the top of the charts at all today, but at one time they had mega selling albums, topped the Billboard pop charts like these other singles artists are doing today and stuff like that. And people think that, you know, this band is a nobody, but they're not. They were a mega band back in the day. They also had a number 7 Billboard Hot 100 hit with the power ballad Wanted Dead or Alive, of which we all know that essentially MTV Unplugged based its show on a performance of that song that Richie and John Bon Jovi did. It also features one of their most underrated ballads, Never Say Goodbye, but all the songs on here, including the deep cuts, amazing, making it a no-brainer for the number 1 album of 1986, in my opinion. All right, mentioned these guys earlier on, can't have a countdown without them. 1987, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Debut album, 18 million copies sold in the US and an estimated 30 million worldwide. It is the largest selling debut record of all time, even above Boston, which has done 16 million. Appetite has done 18. It's simply one of the dirtiest, sleaziest hard rock masterpieces ever. Personally, I think it's the greatest rock album ever. I've done countdowns and placed it in that position. I will stand by that forever. They blend classic rock elements like the Rolling Stones and the Faces with the blues undertone of Aerosmith, and they do it in a unique, original way. They don't just copy it or replicate it the way some bands do. That is one of the reasons I think that Guns N' Roses stands out. A lot of people talk about Guns N' Roses being overhyped. I do not think that is the case. I just think those people have not really listened to the music that close. That's okay if they're not fans, but the Guns N' Roses music is amazing and simply some of the best rock music out there. Every song is good. You've got the opening of Welcome to the Jungle, which is some great, gritty, hard rock on there, to Paradise City that starts melodic but ends rocking super hard. To Sweet Child of Mine, it's one of the greatest guitar riffs ever written and performed by Slash. What guitar player today or back in the 80s didn't learn that riff or can play that riff? Even if you can't do anything else on the guitar, most people know how to play that riff and a few other key things. But for me, the song structure on this stand out. These songs feel like they're compiled from multiple songs. I've talked about this before, where each song on here, can turn on a dime. It just brings a lot of character to it. There's a sort of uncertainty and dangerous about it because you never quite know where the song is going to go, how it's going to end up. You think it's ending, merging into another song. No, that is just this song. But it really captured, in essence, sort of a zeitgeist, a moment in time with that uncertainty and dangerousness, the lyrical type, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think there will ever be another rock album like this one, which is why it is definitely the best album of 1987. Okay, 1988, Poison, Open Up and Say Ah. Second studio album selling over 5 million copies in the US. The album built on everything that was great from the debut, but this one here, I think, took it to a brand new level, especially in terms of production. It is head and shoulders above the debut album. This one here is a party non-stop on it. Kicking off with Nothing But a Good Time, which may be the ultimate party song. Good Love, which got that killer harmonica on it, and just awesome riffing by CeCe. You got the song Your Mama Don't Dance, was a sort of an unexpected or an unlikely cover hit that they did from Messina, or Loggins and Messina. And then you've got the album itself. You have the party stuff, but there's also still some real depth that is tempered into other songs on here, like Fallen Angel, which is personally my favorite song on the album. Probably why I'm such a big fan of the band, but also Every Rose Has Its Thorn, the mega ballad, which climbed all the way to the top spot on the Billboard Hot 100. So even a band like Poison, a glam metal band, could have a #1 hit with a song. But it's that sort of depth that's on it, balanced with the party feel of the album, that definitely makes the album out to be more than it appears on surface. The album has a lot of consistency, just moving through, very solid. Each song builds on strengths of the next, puts this album over the top, in my opinion, of just based on how good it is. The original 10 tracks for me on here really defined the glam metal era, but it's that in and of itself that I think makes this album the best of 1988. All right, and the last album of the decade, 1989, Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood, 5th studio album, sold 6 million copies. First album that the band did after getting sober. That could have been an absolute disaster, but they showed a renewed sense of energy. It's captured on the songs here. They worked with producer Bob Rock, who of course would go on to even greater, bigger things, doing production for Metallica, among others. But he really gave this album a big, full production value and sound. The drums on this thing sound amazing. Real triumph, I think, for the production world and what was able to be achieved on this album. But it's one of the reasons I think that this album sounds so good, and why the songs that are on this are great. From Dr. Feelgood, which is a nice, gritty, sleazy rocker with the bass and drums right up in your face, to Kickstart My Heart with that iconic whammy bar that Mick Mars does on here. That huge, just revved up rockin' sound on speed. The song Same Old Song and Dance, a big rock song that's got melody in it. Just a cool, counterplay on those two things within this. One of my absolute favorites from the band. But this one here is another one like some of the other albums that I've talked about that I've literally heard every song on the radio at one time or another. Even the song She Goes Down, which at the time, back in the 89-90 era, I never thought I would have heard a song like that on the radio. But I did, and just great to hear that, to have one of your favorite albums get every song played on the radio. But this album, its songs simply inescapable at the time around 1989 and 1990, making the album certainly a classic in its own right, but definitely the best album of 1989. And there you go. That is the best albums from 1980 to 1989. I'm sure you guys have your own opinions on this. There's probably other ones you want to include. Let me know. We're going to have a great debate on this topic back and forth. As I mentioned, there is a previous episode for 1970 to 1979, and I do plan on making more of these going forward. So as I said, turn on your notifications so you can make sure you get updates on that as well. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.